The bug type is arguably one of the worst types in the game. Sure, you definitely have great bugs like Scizor, but with their crippling weaknesses, can they beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke challenge of Pokémon Black 2? This means that any Pokémon that faints is dead forever, and I can only catch one new bug per new area. Only time will tell. My first encounter is Sprite the Sewaddle, who is effectively my starter and the only Pokemon I can get before the first gym badge. Anyway, after Sprite destroys my rival catcher's Tepig with no ease and not a single issue at all, I can go ahead and take on Charon for the first gym badge. This is a somewhat scary fight due to Charon's Pokemon having no way to set up with workup and the fact that Sewaddle isn't great. Against Charon's lead Patrat, Sprite outspeeds and goes for a hard bug bite, doing more than half as Patrat goes for the aforementioned workup. However, it never takes advantage of the attack boost because we outspeed and pick up the KO with another bug bite. This just leaves Charon's final Pokemon, Lillipup. Unlike Patrat, Lillipup manages to outspeed and set up a workup, raising its attack stats as a bug bite does less than half. On the following turn, a boosted tackle hits, doing decent damage into Sprite as bug bite is just shy of the KO. This means that Charon uses a potion, but it doesn't get Patrat back to full. This means that our bug bite puts the pupper in range of another bug bite on the following turn. Charon, now completely helpless, just fires off a final tackle, leaving me in the yellow before a bug bite picks up the KO. This wins me a pretty easy first gym badge. As a reward, I can pick up my second encounter, Coke the Venipede, who will turn into Solipede later down the line. For now, however, Coke and Sprite are the only encounters I have access to for the next 2 level caps, so I need to keep them alive no matter what. With that, it's a straight shot to Roxy's gym in Verbank City and her poison types. She brings in Coughing first, and I lead off with our newest member, Coke, for her debut battle. I do have a strategy here with a high reward, but it's extremely risky. You see, Coke has Rollout, which increases after every hit, but the issue is it can miss. And if it misses, especially towards the end, we are in a lot of trouble and basically lose the run. On turn 1, Coke outspeeds and goes for a Defense Curl, which not only boosts my defense, but it also increases the power of Rollout. All Coughing does is go for an Assurance, doing a ton of HP. On the following turn, we can go for a Rollout, which scratches Coughing, as Assurance once again takes a ton of HP away from Coke. On turn number 3, it's the same thing here, with Coke getting Coughing into the yellow and an Assurance connecting, although it's really not that threatening, let's be completely honest. And then with a 4th Rollout, we can take Coughing out, leaving Roxanne with her final Pokemon, an evolved version of Coke. However, Coke proves that new isn't always better, unlike Barney Stinson, and takes her evolved counterpart out with a single Rollout, winning me the battle and the second gym badge. I wonder what's behind the story. Oh no, not Poke Studios, make it stop.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Anyway, shortly after this, we get our first evolution of the playthrough when Sprite evolves into his second form, Swalloden. I'm really not sure how to pronounce that. Anyway, with this evolution, Sprite's gone from happy to depressed. Life's tough. You'll get through it, buddy. If you're not satisfied with your story in life, then the story simply isn't over. After taking a ferry ride to Castilia City and navigating some pretty gross sewers, we get a formal introduction to our bug-type nemesis, Berg. Not sure what he's doing in the sewers, though. He also has a pretty weird gym puzzle that involves sucking you up some tubes with some sticky spiderwebs, although I admit it made for a pretty fun but weird puzzle. Before we can actually face Berg, we get 2 evolutions. The first is Coke the Whirlipede, and Sprite finally gets out of his depressed Spider-Man 2 arc and comes back as a happy Levani. With the added firepower, we now have a chance into Berg's bug-type composition of a team. Berg leads off with Swalloden, and I bring Coke out. It's a pretty similar strategy here as it was in Roxy's gym. We set up a Defense Curl on turn 1 to boost Rollout's power before getting our speed lowered, which really doesn't matter. From there, Rollout takes care of Berg's first 2 Pokemon, leaving him with just his ace, a Levani of his own. We did run out of Rollout turns before we could KO, so instead of Rollout, it's Poison Tail that does Levani in, winning me a pretty easy and tame 3rd gym badge. After witnessing 2 people do some sketchy things, we meet Colress, who wards off some Crustals, which are a future encounter opportunity, by the way. Crustal is an interesting guy because he is a scientist who wants to fight a random 10-year-old. Maybe for his ego, maybe he sees something in me, we'll never know. He uses steel types, and they all take super effective damage from our stab bug moves, so this isn't going to be an easy fight. Colress leads off with Magnemite, and things don't start off well as I accidentally lead off with Coke. I have to hard swap him out to Sprite, who comes in on a Thunder Wave, paralyzing him. Yeah, this really isn't off to a great start. Fortunately, Magneton can't really hit us with its only attacking move Magnet Bomb, so the paralysis isn't the end of the world. It does take a while, but eventually Razor Leaf picks up the KO. Against Clink, Gear Grinds are actually doing decent damage into Sprite because they're a multi-hit move. I also do whiff a Razor Leaf, so we are losing momentum in the fight. Clink then goes for a charge, boosting its special defense completely for free as I get fully paralyzed on the following turn. At this point, most of the momentum is gone. Fortunately, after taking a Gear Grind for a ton of damage, leaving me in the red, we connect with a Razor Leaf for a bit of damage. Sprite can't really stay in, so I need to swap into my other Pokemon, Coke, on a charge, which doesn't really matter. Like with Sprite, we don't have great moves to hit this thing, so I stay in and I spam Bug Bite. Clink, for whatever reason, keeps going for charges, even with its special defense stat maxed out. So like with Magneton, it's a slow process, but Bug Bites eventually pick up the KO, winning me a pretty odd battle. In the Desert Resort, I can pick up my next encounter being a Dwebble, and Dwebble may look incompetent right now, but trust me, he is probably one of the best Pokemon we're going to get in this run. In Lost Thorn Forest, I have a chance of picking up either a Heracross or a Combee, and after a ton of searching, I find a Combee, which ends up being female. So instead of completely useless, it's useless with a niche. Also, I should mention that this thing took like 10 minutes to catch. Either this Combee is a beast, or I have really bad catching luck. Anyway, like I just talked about, we can immediately evolve Combee into Vespiquen. You are probably one of the worst encounters of this run though.
Walk out the door, you see someone that you know and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
But on the other hand, I can also evolve Coke into Solipede, who is a pretty decent Pokemon and one of my favorite bug types. For the comment question, tell me your favorite bug type down in the comments. And while you're down there, you might as well like and subscribe. From here, it's off to face the next gym leader, Elesa, and her electric types. She leads off with Emolga and I with Sprite. Emolga is part flying, so this is going to be kind of scary. However, Emolga leaves the fight immediately with a resisted Volt Switch into Sprite, and in her place, Zebstrika comes in on a Limp Slash. Zebstrika does no Flame Charge, so like I said, this is really scary. We also have a quad weakness to Fire-type moves, so yeah, things are really not in our favor. Fortunately, we can barely take a non-crit on the following turn and respond with a Razor Leaf. Since Zebstrika outspeeds, I need to swap into Coke, who comes in on a Quick Attack. We do get off a Poison Point proc, so that's great as well, and it really helps give us momentum. But before I can pick off Zebstrika, Elesa pulls an Elesa and goes for a Volt Switch. So rather than Zebstrika, it's Flaffy who tanks the Poison Tail for about a third. On the following turn, we do manage to outspeed and nail Flaffy with a second Poison Tail, which actually crits for the immediate KO. Next out is Zebstrika for the second time, so I need to swap. Elesa, who senses this, however, goes for a Pursuit, which does a little bit of damage. Luckily, it doesn't KO, but unfortunately, I made a mistake here since the poison brings Zebstrika into healing range as I bring in Pepsi. This causes Elesa to heal back to full on the following turn, and we can go for a Power Gem for a bit of damage. For whatever reason, Zebstrika goes for a Pursuit rather than a Flame Charge, so we can go for another Power Gem. With the poison now, Zebstrika is deep in the yellow. But at this point, Vespiquen is gonna have to go. You weren't on the team long, and you really didn't do anything, but you'll be missed. Hate losing her to a Flame Charge, but Zebstrika goes for a Quick Attack. So a final Power Gem takes out Zebstrika, leaving her final Pokemon, Emolga. Since we are at decent HP, I let Pepsi eat the takedown down to just 22 HP, but I end up misclicking and going for Gust. Oops. Since Pepsi did KO Zebstrika, I decide to let her live, so I switch into Fanta for his debut battle on a Volt Switch, which does a little less than half. I do risk a crit here, bringing me down to just 5 HP, as I then set up a Rock Polish to raise my speed. Since I know I outspeed, I can take Emolga out with a Rock Slide, winning me the battle and the 4th gym badge. Although I gotta say that was a bit sloppy. I mean, look at my team after. After a quick run-in with Team Plasma, I can head to the adjacent route in Driftville City and pick up a Shelmet who I can't evolve. You see, this is a trade evolution that needs Karrablast, which I can't get, so this thing is utterly useless. Although it does have a slight niche that you'll see later. The next gym leader is Clay and his ground types, and this is probably going to be one of the hardest fights in the playthrough due to his Steel-type Excadrill. It resists our stat bug moves and has super effective rock slides, which could hit all of our Pokemon for super effective damage. This is going to be a bloodbath of a battle. Fortunately, against the lead Crocodile, we have a good matchup with Sprite. A Razor Leaf does a ton of damage, although it is nerfed by Intimidate. In return, a crunch only does about a third of Sprite's HP, and we can't flinch since we are faster. On the following turn, Clay heals up, which is actually preferable since that's one less potion he can use on Excadrill. A follow-up Razor Leaf then brings the Croc deep into the red. A crunch does do a little bit of damage, but it doesn't really matter because we can pick up the KO with a third Razor Leaf. Seeing the super effective damage into Sprite, Excadrill comes in next, and I have a plan. But first, I need a way to get our newest member Shelmet in for free, and that requires a sacrifice. And sadly, it's Pepsi who has to take the fall. She comes in on a rock slide, eviscerating her. Thank you for your service. We wouldn't have gotten here without you, and you earned our place in our hearts after that amazing performance against Zebstrika. Anyway, with 7-Up, the plan is to get off a yawn to put this thing to sleep. 7-Up is holding an Eviolite boosting his defenses, so a non-crit rock slide never KOs him. He can then go for a yawn, meaning on the subsequent turn, Excadrill will fall asleep. But that means 7-Up's work is done here. Like Pepsi, he takes a final rock slide, which destroys him. But at the end of the turn, Excadrill falls asleep. With Excadrill asleep, I can get Sprite once more completely for free. On the first guaranteed sleep turn, I can go for a Razor Leaf, which does about a quarter. But then the second Razor Leaf crits for the clean KO, which takes care of the scariest Pokemon so far. This is huge because last is Sandslash, who goes down to 2 Razor Leafs, winning me the 5th gym badge. Although, it did cost me 2 members. RIP 7-Up and Pepsi. You will be missed. Thanks to the increase in the level cap, we can evolve Fanta into Crusto, which gives me a ton of attack and bulk to work with. I can also get a replacement encounter in Chargestone Cave, being a Joltik. Joltik's electric type makes him a great option into any future flying trainers. I can also evolve him right away into Galvantula, so that's great as well. I can then pick up another encounter in the Relic Castle, being a Volcarona. Volcarona is normally a Pokemon you can't obtain this early due to it evolving pretty late, but Game Freak was really nice to include a static one here. Unfortunately, he's not that useful now due to a lack of good moves, but trust me, towards the end he will be a great Pokemon. After arriving in Mistralton City, I find myself back into the gym challenge, and my next trainer is Skyla and her flying types. This is going to be a hard battle because all of her bug types hit my flying types for super effective damage except for Dr. Pepper, the Galvantula, and Fanta, so we do have some leverage into this fight. Against Elite Swoobat, I bring out Fanta, who's our best answer, with Sturdy. Swoobat also can't really hit us. In fact, it just goes for a Heart Stamp, only doing a little bit of chip as we connect with a Rock Slide for the instant KO, and it also gives us a ton of momentum. Skyla's next Pokemon is Skarmory, who can hit for super effective damage thanks to the pesky Steel type. So I need to swap to Dr. Pepper on a Steel Wing, which is resisted by our electric typing. We then outspeed and go for an Electro Ball, which is not enough for the KO. Fortunately, all she does is go for an Agility to raise her speed. Skyla then heals up, and an Electro Ball does a lot less damage around thanks to the speed boost from the last turn. Still, this doesn't matter because all Skarmory can do is go for a weak Steel Wing before Electro Ball at last picks up the KO. Last out is Swanna, who never stood a chance and goes down to a quad super effective Electro Web, winning me the battle and the 6th gym badge. After taking a quick plane ride to Reversal Mountain, I can pick up my next encounter, being Scorpie. This does round out my squad to 6, and you might be thinking Drapion is a phenomenal Pokemon, which it is, but I actually can't use it since it's a poison dark type, so this thing is utterly useless and will see no screen time. On the way to find Team Plasma, I have an upcoming fight with Catcher. You might be wondering, who the hell is Catcher? He's the rival from way back in the beginning who we really haven't fought yet. He only has 3 Pokemon, but 2 of them are pretty scary with stab super effective damage against my bug types. Not only does he have an Unfezant with Scope Lens, meaning air slashes can both crit, flinch, or both, but he also has Charcoal, Flamethrower, and Boar. So this thing basically one-shots anything on the team. But I have a plan. Catcher leads off with the aforementioned Unfezant, and I bring in Pepper, who is one of the few Pokemon that can outspeed this monster. Anyway, a super effective Electro Web immediately picks up the KO, filling me with relief. But that relief is quickly over as Emboar comes in. Since a Charcoal boosted Flamethrower would destroy me, I hard swap to Root Beer the Volcarona on what I expected to be a Flamethrower, but it ends up going for Takedown instead. Hey, I'm not complaining. Root Beer is our only Pokemon that doesn't take super effective damage from fire moves, so he is absolutely our only option. On the following turn, Root Beer goes up in the air with a Fly and then does more than half. Emboar then goes for a Rollout, which on turn 1 is always going to be super weak, so we can survive any roll that's not a crit. Since Fly did more than half, we can outspeed and pick off what is a pretty scary Pokemon on the following turn with another Fly. Catcher's final Pokemon is a Simipour, who is by far his least threatening Pokemon. Simipour would obviously destroy Root Beer, so I swapped to Sprite on a Scald, which luckily doesn't burn. Simipour can't touch us, so it goes for a Leer and Shame before a Leaf Blade gets the clean one-shot, winning me the battle. That was a pretty scary battle, but I gotta say, the solution was pretty simple. Up ahead we have another encounter, and this is another phenomenal Pokemon. Not you, I already have you. Right here. Heracross is the best Pokemon we're gonna have access to since it has Guts, meaning that if it has a status condition, its attack is increased. With enough speed and attack EVs, it's an absolute powerhouse. However, there is a catch. There is a coin flip where Heracross could have Swarm, which is an awful ability. I fortunately win the coin flip and Club Soda has Guts, so Skorupi. Now up ahead is a special trainer. He may look unsuspecting, but on the surface he is calm and ready, and I gotta say, he is ready. If you didn't know, this is my second playthrough ever of Pokemon Black and White 2. Back in November I played this game for the first time ever, and it was pretty fun. However, this gentleman's Lucario killed my starter Emboar, so I am out for revenge. The Elite Durant is easy enough and is walled by Dr. Pepper, who picks up the KO with a few Electrowebs, bringing in the main course. I decide to switch to my starter Sprite on a Swords Dance, which is a little bit scary, I'm not gonna lie. However, this thing just has Bone Rush, which we resist, so after a few Leaf Blades, Lucario falls. It feels really nice to beat this deathless, so this is for you, Iron Man. Even easier is the next gym fight against Drayden. With some speed EVs, his dragons are no issue and are all one-shot by Guts boosted close combats, winning me a pretty easy battle. However, Team Plasma uses this moment as a chance to attack and now threatens the entire region. They start out by freezing a town for whatever reason, I'm honestly not sure what that accomplishes. Anyway, that's not my concern right now, because after going through this cool underwater tunnel, it's time for the final gym fight against Marlin and his water types. As Marlin leads off with Carracosta, I bring in Sprite. We outspeed and go for a super effective Leaf Blade, which unfortunately doesn't KO this thing thanks to Sturdy. As a result, Carracosta goes for a Shell Smash, lowering his defenses but raising his attack and speed. This is a little bit scary, I'm not gonna lie. Marlin then on the following turn heals back to full, which doesn't matter because with another Leaf Blade we're back in the same spot. Even with the Shell Smash speed boost, Carracosta is naturally slow, so we outspeed and pick up the KO with another Leaf Blade. Second is Wailord, who is pretty bulky and powerful, but not bulky enough to stand a Leaf Blade from Sprite, so he falls without ever getting a hit off. Last is Jellicent, but Sprite rips a critical at Leaf Blade into this thing, winning me the battle and the 8th and final gym badge. I gotta say, Leavanny is a super underrated Pokemon. I was not expecting it to be this powerful. Unfortunately, the Team Plasma stuff can't wait anymore, so we have to address that. The first step in doing this is facing Colress from earlier, and he is a really threatening team with bulky steel types, so finding a way to hit them isn't the easiest thing in the world. Against the lead Magneton, I bring out Coke, who bulldozes it for a ton of damage, but it's reduced by Eviolite. Unfortunately, since we didn't KO, we get paralyzed by a Thunder Wave. Since we are slower, Magneton Volt switches into Magna Zone before we can pick up the KO with Bulldoze. Luckily, we do break through paralysis and manage to rip a massive Bulldoze, leaving Magneton deep in the yellow. Since we are dead to Flash Cannon and don't outspeed, I swap to Club Soda, who takes the resisted Flash Cannon. But with Poison, we're left with around half HP. Still, this doesn't matter, and we can nab our first KO of the fight with a super effective Brick Break. We also do get some HP back from a Citrus Berry as Colress brings in his next Pokemon, Behem. Since we are dead to Psychic Crit, I hard swap to Sprite, who takes decent damage from the projected Psychic. From there, a super effective X-Scissor on the following turn does a ton of damage but is just shy of the KO as Behem sets up a Calm Mind, raising his special stats. Colress does heal up on the following turn as we once again go for an X-Scissor, which is unfortunately shy of the KO. Fortunately, we can pick off Behem on the following turn with a 4th X-Scissor. This causes Colress to send back in Magneton. We can't really hit meaningful damage and it can outdamage us, so I hard swap to Fanta as Metagross goes for an Agility, raising its speed. Metang luckily then avoids a Meteor Mash, allowing me to set up a Shell Smash, raising my attack and speed in exchange for lowering my defenses. Remember how I said Fanta would be one of my best Pokemon? Yeah, this is why. Since we avoided Meteor Mash, I set up another Shell Smash, getting to +4 as Metang then goes for an Agility for whatever reason. But since we have Sturdy intact, we're not dead to any move, so I can get up to +6 attack and speed. Metang, sensing the fight is over, just goes for another Agility, which is completely useless. From here, both Metang and Magneton go down to a super effective +6 Bulldoze, leaving Colress with his final Pokemon, Kling Klang. Unfortunately, this thing is holding air balloons, so I have to hit it with a resisted X-Scissor first, which does pop the balloon. All Kling Kling can do in return is just go for a shift gear. Once again, Colress is just throwing the bag and is destroyed on the following turn with a bulldoze, winning me the battle. But that fight is just the start of our troubles, as Kirim then fuses with Zekrom, meaning the entire world could easily fall. In order to save the world, we have to face Ghetsis and make him pay for his crimes against humanity. But first, we have to face Kirim. Luckily, we can use a similar strategy against Colress with Fanta. On turn 1, we go for Shell Smash and then pick up the KO with a Rock Wrecker. With Kirim out of the way, it's Ghetsis time. He leads off with Confronting, and I with my go-to, Fanta. On turn number 1, Confronting goes for a useless Protect, allowing me to set up a free Shell Smash to raise my stats. Since we outspeed, I go for a second Shell Smash, but Confronting nails Fanta with a Toxic. This puts me on a timer. However, I gave Fanta a Pecha Berry, meaning we are cured from the poisoning. On the following turn, we go for a Rock Slide, which at +4 destroys the Coffin, meaning the Coffin will need a Coffin. Next out from Ghetsis is his Groundwater type Seismitoad, which could be an issue with Muddy Water. Luckily, we just outspeed and pick up the KO with a single X-Scissor. Third from Ghetsis is a Hydreigon, who is pretty scary on paper, but like Seismitoad, he's simply outsped and destroyed by a super effective X-Scissor. From there, I can chain kills into both his Drapion and Electros, leaving Ghetsis with his final Pokemon Toxicroak. I don't really have a good move to hit this thing with since it resists all of my moves. Even with our defenses lowered, we have Sturdy, so we always live at least one hit. I outspeed and connect with a Rock Slide, doing more than half despite it being resisted. Since Toxicroak lived, we take more than half from Brick Break. So with a final Rock Slide, the world is saved and Team Plasma is done for. Now that I can continue my normal 10-year-old duties, my next stop is at Victory Road, where I can become the champion of the region. But before I even think about theory crafting, I have a final rival fight with Catcher. His team hasn't really changed since the first fight, but he does have a Bouffalon with Head Charge, which hits like a semi-truck. He also has the same Scope Lens Unfezant with Air Slash and Charcoal Flamethrower and Boar. This fight is nearly impossible and took hours to plan for. No, I'm just kidding. I click Close Combat 4 times with Guts Heracross, and that wins me a pretty easy battle. With that, I'm at the Pokemon League where 5 trainers await me. The Elite Four isn't insanely hard with the right preparations, but Iris on the other hand, she can pose some trouble that I'll get to later. Here's my final team leveled up to the final cap of 58. First, I have Club Soda. As you just saw, Guts' physical moves go insane. Second is my starter Sprite, who hits really hard with Leaf Blade, X-Scissor, and Shadow Claw. She also has Swords Dance to boost those attacks even further. Next is Coke the Solipede, who is really only here for support. She does have Baton Pass and Agility to raise my other more powerful Pokemon Speed. Fourth is Fanta. As you just saw, Fanta is an absolute monster with Shell Smash, so he's a no-brainer. Fifth is Root Beer, who I haven't really used yet, but he's about to do a ton of damage into the Elite Four now that he has more powerful moves. Last is Dr. Pepper, whose electric typing gives me coverage. He also has Volt Switch for great pivoting. Let's do this. First in the Elite Four is the Dark-type trainer Grimsley. Since Bug is super effective into Dark, I thought this would be our best matchup. Grimsley leads off with Liepard, and I bring out Fanta. After eating a weak Night Slash on turn 1, Fanta does what she does best and goes for a Shell Smash to boost her stats. The next turn is a bit risky because even though we can outspeed and set up another Shell Smash, we need to dodge a crit Night Slash. Night Slash comes out, and it doesn't crit, meaning on the following turn, Liepard falls to another X-Scissor. And by giving Root Beer an EXP share, he gains an extra level and learns Quiver Dance, which is a phenomenal move that we'll get to later. Second is Scrafty, who stands no chance and falls to an X-Scissor. Oh shoot. Fortunately, Rock Tomb barely leaves Fanta alive with 6 HP to spare, but I was shocked to see that didn't kill because my calcs told me it would. Fortunately, we can recover from this because as Grimsley heals up Scrafty on the following turn, we can set up a third Shell Smash, getting all the way to +6. This means that X-Scissor is now a guaranteed KO into Scrafty. From there, I can take care of Grimsley's next 2 Pokemon, Crocodile and Bisharp, winning me an extremely risky fight. Second in the Elite Four is Chantel, the Ghost-type trainer, and I decide to switch things up a little bit. I lead off with Root Beer for a second battle as Chantel leads off with Confronting. Fortunately, this thing doesn't know Toxic, so I can set up a Quiver Dance, and for those who don't know, Quiver Dance raises both special stats and speed, so it's really a great move all around. All we have to do is tank a few weak Shadow Balls in the process before getting to +3 special attack. From there, a flamethrower decimates the coffin, who never stood a chance anyway. Second is Chandelure, who won't go down to a flamethrower since it's part fire. Instead I go for a psychic, but like with Scrafty, Chandelure survives with a sliver and heals up with a health citrus berry. Chandelure then retaliates with a fire blast, which would have needed a crit to take me out anyway. But from there we can pick up the KO with another psychic and finish off the fight with 2 more psychics into Drifloon and Golurk. Third is the psychic type trainer Caitlyn, and this is once again going to be another easy fight since we have stab super effective damage. Caitlyn leads off with Musharna, and I bring back Fanta. We outspeed to go for a Shell Smash to raise our special stats and speed as we get hit by a Yawn. This isn't a huge deal, however, because we can then take Musharna out with a +2 X-Scissor on the following turn before falling asleep. But no issue here, since we wake up, and I just realized I forgot to attach a Chesto Berry. This is really bad as Reuniclus comes in. I decide to risk the sleep since we have Sturdy, but we don't wake up and Reuniclus rips a massive Psychic into Fanta. Yeah, this isn't good. I need Fanta for later, so I hard swap into my next best Pokemon, Rupier, on an Energy Ball, which is luckily quad resisted. I then decide to use the same strategy against Chantel and go for a Quiver Dance to raise my special stats. And with the special defense boost, a Psychic really doesn't do that much damage. I then decide to repeat the turn and get off another Quiver Dance to get to +2, as Psychic only does a little bit of damage into me. From there I go for a Flamethrower, which barely leaves Reuniclus alive, which has happened in all 3 Elite Four fights. Chantel then heals up on the following turn, so I do what I always do when this happens and set up another Quiver Dance. And then on the following turn we melt Reuniclus with another Flamethrower. From there it's a clean sweep as +3 Flamethrowers destroy Caitlyn's Sigilyph and Gothitelle, winning me the battle. Last in the Elite Four is Marshall, who is by far our scariest matchup considering all 4 of his Pokemon have a way to hit me for super effective damage. So this is going to be a huge issue. Against the Elite Throw, I bring in Club Soda, who can outspeed and pick up the KO with a neutral close combat, which is boosted by Guts. Second is Mienshao, who is normally speedy and hits hard, but with some speed EV training we can outspeed it and destroy it with a single close combat. Third is Conkeldurr, and close combat never actually KOs, so instead I use a normal gem boosted Facade to guarantee the KO on this thing. This just leaves Marshall with his final Pokemon Stalk, who has Sturdy, meaning we can never one-shot it. At -3 defense, I really don't think Club Soda can take an attack from this thing. Instead, I swap to Fanta on the incoming Rock Slide, which does a ton of damage, but this is all part of the plan. Because I can swap to Dr. Pepper on the following turn on what should be a Brick Break, but Salt goes for a Rock Slide, which does a ton of damage. I was really expecting Brick Break here, but that pivoting was completely useless. It doesn't matter, because using an Electric Gem on the following turn, a Volt Switch does a ton of damage. But more importantly, it breaks Sturdy, putting Club Soda in the perfect position. He comes in on a resisted Payback, which barely touches him, meaning we can finish off the fight with a Brick Break. And with that, there's only one trainer left. Iris, the champion, is by far our hardest fight yet, and it's gonna be a team effort. She's a scary team of Dragon and Rock types that it's super hard. Her biggest threat is Hydreigon with insane coverage, Aggron with stab super effective rock moves, Archeops who is speedy and has stab super effective flying and rock moves, Lapras who is pretty hard with great coverage, and she has Haxorus with Dragon Dance, meaning I could potentially be on the receiving end of a sweep. My bugs have come so far, but it could all come crashing down on us. Win or lose, this is the end of the challenge, so let's do this. Iris leads with Hydreigon, and I with Rupier, who has one goal: defeat this thing. We outspeed and go for a Silver Wind, doing a ton of damage, but it's not a one-shot. So Hydreigon is able to go for a Surf, which doesn't even do half my HP. This means we are free to take Hydreigon out on the following turn with another Silver Wind. I need Rupier for later, and I need a clean switch. And in order to have a clean switch, I need a sacrifice. Sadly, that burden falls on my starter, Sprite. Sprite has been with us since the very beginning, all the way back when we caught him. The good news is, Sprite will always survive a Rock Slide as long as it doesn't crit. With a heavy heart, I swap into Sprite one last time. Rock Slide comes out, but it crits, and Sprite falls. Thank you so much for your service. This run is for you. Club Soda comes in where his teammate once stood, and with a Fighting Gem boosted close combat, he's able to outspeed and eviscerate the dragon. But our moment of levity is quickly over as a huge threat comes in, Archeops. This thing has acrobatics, which could one-shot all of my Pokemon, so I'm gonna need a way to neuter this thing. And sadly, we need another sacrifice. My goal is to use Rupier as a sack and hopefully trigger Flame Body. If it doesn't activate by the end of the turn, it's not the end of the world, but it would really help. Rootbeer put in the work and it sucks that he won't be able to join us in the Hall of Fame. Rootbeer, thank you so much for your great performance in the Elite Four. With an acrobatics, Rootbeer joined Sprite, 7-Up, and Pepsi in the Great Beyond. But in a final act of servitude, he gets off the Flame Body proc, which helps out a ton. Rootbeer's sacrifice also gives me a free switch to Dr. Pepper, who's able to pick up the KO with a single Thunderbolt. Fourth from Iris is her Steel Rock type Aggron, which could be an issue. I start out with a Thunderbolt doing a ton of damage into Aggron, and I get the Paralysis, which is super clutch. All Aggron does is go for an Autonomize to raise its speed. We then pick up the KO with another Thunderbolt, causing Iris to send in her penultimate Pokemon, Haxorus. This thing with Dragon Dance is a monster, but I have no choice but to face it head on. I outspeed and go for a Thunderbolt to first break Focus Sash as Haxorus goes for a scary Dragon Dance, raising attack and defense. On the following turn, Haxorus outspeeds and goes for an Earthquake, which does a ton of damage, but we barely survive with 1 HP thanks to a held Focus Sash. From there, I can Volt Switch out for a bit of chip damage. More importantly, however, I get a free switch to Club Soda, and from this range, close combat is a guaranteed kill. Of course, if Haxorus attacks, Club Soda falls, but we can use Shell Smash Fanta. It does get a lot hairier, but it's definitely possible to beat this thing. But Haxorus gets greedy and goes for Dragon Dance, meaning with a Guts boosted close combat, we can pick up the KO. This just leaves Iris' final Pokemon, Lapras. But that Ice type isn't doing it any favors, and he falls to a close combat, winning me the battle and the entire run. I gotta say, that was a super fun run. Like I mentioned, this is my second playthrough of these games, and I have to say, they've grown on me. Like I mentioned, these were my second playthrough of these games, and they really have grown on me. I still prefer Black and White 1, but I do think they are worthy sequels. Using the bug type in what is considered one of the hardest vanilla Pokemon games was a super fun challenge. I was actually hesitant to make the video because I thought planning would take forever and because bugs suck. But I was surprised to see how good they were, at least in Gen 5 and beyond. The amount of sweeps I was able to pull off was astonishing. It was super fun using Crustle, Volcarona, and Heracross. They're all super underrated Pokemon in Nuzlocke. Well, maybe except for Heracross. On another note, I do want to make more videos, and when summer comes, I definitely will have more free time to do so. Unfortunately, I'm not in a place where I can upload a ton at the moment, but I do plan on making more videos this year. That's honestly all I have to say. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon Nuzlockes. You should also follow my Twitter or X, depending on who you are, which is linked in the description. That's all I have to say, and I'll see you next time. Peace.